Carlos Delgado is criminally underrated. Criminally! People should go to jail for not recognizing how good this dude was. Okay, maybe not that far, but seriously, he's one of only 6 hitters in the entire history of MLB to hit 30 home runs in a decade's worth of consecutive seasons. He's in the top 25 for home runs and top 30 for RBIs during the expansion era. That's a 60-year time period. He was the 15th player ever to hit 4 home runs in a single game. He has a better career OPS plus than Ken Griffey Jr., George Brett, Joe Morgan, and Sammy Sosa, just to name a few guys. He leads the Blue Jays franchise all-time in walks, doubles, home runs, RBIs, OPS, you name it. He leads all Puerto Rican-born players in home runs and RBIs as well. He never used steroids and never got into any conflict, and yet, despite all of these accolades, and many more we'll get into in a little bit, Delgado's track record leaves little to remember. 2 All-Star nods, a few Silver Sluggers, 1 trip to the playoffs, a one-and-done trip on the Hall of Fame ballot where he received just 3.8% of votes. So who is Carlos Delgado, and why doesn't he get the respect that he deserves as one of the greatest Puerto Rican baseball players of all time when it's all said and done? When Delgado was an international free agent in Puerto Rico at age 16, he signed on with the Blue Jays just after graduating high school. This came despite many other teams competing for his services. It was understandable why, though. The Blue Jays had just finished their 6th consecutive season, 10 games above 500, and were clearly a team on the rise, and that was something Delgado envisioned being a part of. Delgado rose quickly through the minor leagues, landing in Dunedin in 1992, where a 30 home run, 100 RBI campaign landed him Minor League Player of the Year honors from USA Today. He eventually was named the number 4 prospect in all of baseball by Baseball America and earned his call-up by just next season. Toronto fans will remember that 1993 season because it was the last time they won a World Series. The Jays had come a game away from a World Series berth in 1985, and while Delgado was tearing up the minors, they made it back to the ALCS 2 more times and then won consecutive World Series in 1992 and 1993. That latter year was the first year Delgado got a sniff of MLB action with just 2 plate appearances. He watched his team win the big one from the sidelines, and though he did receive a World Series ring, I'm sure he was hungry to win another one while playing a huge role on the team. Despite being signed as a catcher originally and moving to left field in the minors in the early parts of his MLB career, Carlos Delgado eventually moved to first base and became one of the most dominant sluggers in the American League for over a decade. After a solid 1996 season, Delgado clubbed 30 home runs in 1997, his first of 10 consecutive seasons doing so. The year after that, he achieved his first triple-digit RBI season with 115, the first of 9 such seasons in his career. The year after that, in 1998, he stepped it up again, clubbing 40 home runs for the first time. In the years prior to 2000, Delgado was establishing himself as a premier hitting talent, but hadn't quite taken the league by storm yet. Many knew who he was and what he was capable of, but without the proper talent surrounding him yet on the Blue Jays, he remained widely underrated, not making an all-star team despite a Silver Slugger and MVP votes in 2 seasons. Then came the 2000 season. There are only 3 hitters since the beginning of the expansion era in 1961 to achieve a season with over 40 home runs, over 50 doubles, and an OPS over 1100. Todd Helton did it in back-to-back seasons in 2000 and 2001, and Albert Pujols did it while being the best hitter on the planet in 2003. And then there's Carlos Delgado. Delgado did this in 2000 alongside Helton in a year where he finished just 4th in AL MVP voting, but took the leap altogether. Let's talk about this 2000 season for a second because it's arguably the best of Delgado's career. He was one of just 2 MLB players to play all 162 games that season, the other being his teammate Jose Cruz. He led the American League in doubles with 57 and total bases with 378. He finished 4th in AL for batting average, home runs, and RBI, and his on-base, slugging, and OPS numbers placed 2nd in the American League. Delgado was arguably the most well-rounded hitter in the American League this season, but the Blue Jays underwhelmed with an 83-win season, so his efforts weren't as recognized as they probably should have been. His 181 OPS plus meant that he was 81% better than the league average hitter that year. But with studs like Alex Rodriguez lingering around, he never got any of the awards he probably deserved. All of his grouping with Alex Rodriguez on my stats here also came back to bite him in 2003. Delgado had yet another amazing year in 2003, leading all of MLB with 145 runs batted in and leading the American League with a 1.019 OPS and a 161 OPS plus, one of just 2 American League players to go over 1,000 OPS that year. He was also just one of 3 American League players to walk over 100 times that season. Despite his 6.0 wins above replacement and dynamite offense, he received 1 less first place vote than A-Rod for the AL MVP award and landed in 2nd place, missing out on what would become his best shot to win an MVP in his career. 2000 to 2003 was arguably the peak of Delgado's illustrious career. Carlos Delgado was also one of just 5 MLB players from 2000 to 2003 to draw over 100 walks in each of those 4 seasons. I mention this because in addition to his contact contact skills and elite power, he also had great plate discipline. His ranks across the board in this 4-year window are staggering, especially considering it also lined up with dominant stretches from guys like A-Rod, Bonds, Sosa, and others, many of whom were using performance-enhancing drugs at the time. Delgado was clean as a whistle and placed in the top 10 of all MLB hitters for games played, runs scored, doubles, home runs, slugging, and OPS+, and even breached the top 5 for on-base percentage and runs batted in. He was truly among the elite, just not getting the same recognition as most of them, and that was mostly because of his team still. When Delgado signed, the Jays had a winning culture, they had playoff appearances, and when he finally made it to the major leagues, they were coming off their second consecutive World Series win. It's almost unimaginable to think that in the dozen seasons that followed, the Blue Jays never finished above third place, never won above 90 games, were below 500 in half of those seasons, and wouldn't see the playoffs again until 2015. Carlos Delgado did everything he could, but for 12 years in Toronto, he never saw the glory of October baseball. He understandably decided to leave in free agency in 2005, signing a 4-year, $52 million deal with the Florida Marlins of all teams. The Marlins, 2 years removed from a shocking World Series win and another winning season that followed, welcomed Delgado into the lineup. Supplemented by the young Miguel Cabrera and speedy contact guys like Juan Pierre and Luis Castillo, he seemed like a perfect fit for the lineup. In his first year there, despite playing in a different league altogether, he continued to tear up baseballs. Delgado did his usual, clubbing over 30 home runs with over 100 RBIs and a 300 batting average. He's one of just 20 Marlins ever to hit over 30 home runs in a season. For pretty much all of the categories listed below besides batting average, Delgado finished in the top 10 in the National League that year. His 161 OPS+ and 582 slugging percentage ranked third in the National League that season, right behind Albert Pujols and Derek Lee. The Marlins achieved another winning season but missed the playoffs, and then did one of their classic fire sales where they completely blew up their roster for some spicy prospects. They really like to do this if you didn't know. So despite Delgado's great first season and commitment to Florida for 3 more years, he was shipped out of town to a division rival for Mike Jacobs and Yusmeiro Petit. If you needed some symbolism for people undervaluing Carlos Delgado, this is one of the best examples. For the Mets, they were trying to win now with a new young core and some exciting free agent signings, and Delgado seemed like the last piece of the puzzle. But at age 34, with his third team in 3 years, many didn't know what to expect out of Delgado despite his remarkable consistency. Well, guess what? He was remarkably consistent yet again. Delgado's 38 home runs in 2006 were his most since his 2003 season, where he was the runner-up for the American League MVP award and is still tied for the 8th highest single-season total in Mets history. While the batting average and on-base numbers saw a steady decline in his 3 prime years with the Mets, he continued to slug at the plate and put up solid power numbers. Also worth mentioning, Delgado finally made it to the playoffs in 2006. After 14 long years without the playoffs, Delgado finally got the chance to play past the regular season, and it's safe to say he made the most of it. In their run to Game 7 of the Championship Series, Delgado raked at the plate with 4 homers total, including 3 in the CS alone. Later in 2008, Delgado set the Mets' all-time record for RBIs in a single game with 9 total. Better yet, this came in a Subway Series game in the Bronx against the Yankees, making it a tinge sweeter for the Mets fans. Despite his advanced age of 36, Delgado achieved his first top 10 MVP finish since 2005 with another 38 home run campaign after a down 2007 season. Overall, in this trio of winning seasons for New York, Delgado clubbed 100 home runs total, maintained a cumulative OPS plus 20% better than league average, walked nearly 200 times, and played at least 140 games each season despite playing in his mid-30s. He was exactly what the Mets needed and remains one of the most fondly remembered sluggers in their recent history despite his time in Queens being admittedly brief. But in 2009, after playing in at least 125 games every season of his career since 1996, 13 years prior, the wheels finally came off for Delgado. The 37-year-old had a bone spur and torn labrum in his left hip and underwent season-ending surgery. Hip injuries would plague Delgado as he would need another surgery for his right hip the following year. Ultimately, his quest for 500 home runs fell short by 27, and he retired in April in 2011 after 17 years in MLB. Delgado achieved a ton in his long career, including over 2,000 hits, over 1,100 walks, and over 1,500 runs batted in. His 457 home runs from 1996 to 2008 is the 6th highest of any MLB hitter in that dozen-year time span. This places him in an elite group of Hall of Fame caliber hitters, including Barry Bonds, Manny Ramirez, Sammy Sosa, Jim Thome, and Alex Rodriguez. Outside of baseball itself, Delgado's work has proven him to be a fantastic human being. He started numerous nonprofit efforts, including Extra Bases, which focuses on assisting the youth of Puerto Rico, as well as Sapientus Week, an effort to bring distinguished public figures documentaries into Puerto Rican schools to bring awareness to their educational crisis. He was awarded the Roberto Clemente Award in 2006 for his continued efforts, an honor I'm sure he'll cherish forever, with Clemente being arguably the greatest Puerto Rican baseball player of all time. And that's the book on Carlos Delgado, a spectacularly underrated career that occurred in an era saturated with star-powered talent. With all of these accolades, I'm hoping the contemporary era committee will help Carlos get into the Hall like they did for Fred McGriff. But even if that doesn't happen, I hope this video stands as a testament to how freakishly talented and consistent Carlos Delgado was. There aren't many that can hold a candle to him both on and off the field. Even when he was approaching age 40, Carlos Delgado stayed effective in the big leagues because he maintained his health, and you can do the same with today's sponsor,